Alrighty, so this is obviously not one of my normal videos. This video has to do with the NonSequitur Show court case. So if you've been living on another planet for the last couple of years, the NonSequitur Show was a YouTube channel hosted by these two guys, Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis. They had about 30,000 subs and were doing pretty well. But in June 2019, they had a pretty public falling out. Kyle kicked Steve off the show and then ran off with all the money. So in August 2019, Steve sued Kyle in North Carolina Business Court. If you want to see what's happened in the case so far, you can go to the North Carolina Business Court's website. The address is at the top. And if you're outside the United States, you will need a VPN to access it. Just search for McRae in the search box on the left, click on McRae v. Curtis, and then click on dockets to see what's been filed. Just a quick rundown of the case so far. Steve filed suit in August 2019, and Kyle had until the end of September to respond, which he failed to do. So Steve was awarded a default in October, and then finally in January 2020, Kyle was ordered to hand over everything related to the channel. So Kyle responded to the court for the very first time in February 2020, claiming that he was never properly served in the case. He claims that he was living with his now ex-boyfriend when the court papers were sent to his old address, which was his mother's house. So Kyle has filed a bunch of documents under oath with the court that he claims show that he was living at his boyfriend's house at the time of service. And one of those documents is this debit card statement from Discover Bank. He actually filed two statements. One is supposedly from August and the other from November 2019. Now, unfortunately for Kyle, he's a fucking moron. So these redactions were completely useless. You could literally just use your mouse to select all the text, hit Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste it into a notepad and see what was underneath. So an unredacted version of this statement would look like this. Obviously, the red boxes are my redactions, just for the purposes of this video. So at first glance, this looks fairly legit. We've got a statement from August 2019 with an address that matches his boyfriend's address. And we've even got a $600 PayPal transaction to someone named Benjamin, which just so happens to match the amount he says he was paying rent to his boyfriend, who also just happened to be named Benjamin. But is this fake? Now, there are a few things about this address field that are a bit odd. First thing is that the font is clearly different between Kyle's name and Kyle's address. You can clearly see that the R is different, and you can clearly see that the C is different. So the font that Discover uses in these statements is called Futura BT, and that's the font that Kyle's name is printed in. But the two address lines below it are written in a font called Source Sans Pro, which rather unsurprisingly is a font designed by Adobe themselves and ships with all their products. So we've asked around a bunch of people who have Discover cards, and everyone that got back to us has confirmed that not only is the font consistent between the name and the address field, but it's also in capital letters, and they all confirm that Discover uses a 9-digit zip code rather than the 5-digit zip code shown here. The other inconsistency here is to do with the barcode just above the address box. Now this barcode is called an intelligent mail barcode, and it's what the automatic mail sorting machines use to route the mail to its eventual destination. So it doesn't actually read the zip code down here, 28263. It actually scans the barcode up here. And lucky for us, the US Postal Service has a website where you can actually decode that barcode by converting each symbol into either an F for a full bar, a D for descending bar, A for ascending bar, or a T for a track bar. So Kyle's barcode starts with a descending bar, then an ascending bar, and a T for track bar, and another ascending bar, and so on. Until you get this 65 character string, and then you can hit the decode button. And when you hit the decode button, you'll see that the zip code encoded by the barcode is not 28263 for Charlotte, is 27313, which is Pleasant Garden in North Carolina. which is where the original summons and complaint were sent in the first place. So this is pretty damning in and of itself. And just to be clear, what I've shown you so far is already public information, and the court is certainly aware of it. But is there more we can find out? Of course there is, but it involves getting a bit down and dirty with the PDF document itself. But when you look inside a PDF, it doesn't look like much fun. It looks like complete gibberish. So first thing we need to do is make it somewhat readable to human eyes, and for that I used a little utility called QPDF. It's available on Windows and Linux, and if you run the command at the bottom, you'll get a somewhat easier to read version. But there's one more step that you need to follow to get all the code out of the file, and there's a nice little Python library called PDF Reader that can do that. So all that's happening here is that I've opened up the file from the previous step, navigated to page 14, which is the November statement, and then printed out all the text. And then you can open it up in whatever your favorite notepad app is, and look at the raw code. And what do you know? Kyle's been well and truly busted using the touch-up tool inside Adobe software, and he has edited the address field. So you can see here this touch-up text edit marker, which Adobe inserts into the PDF. And all it means is that at least some of the text in between the begin text and the end text has been changed. I'll show you in a minute how to distinguish between what is the original text and what has been edited in a minute. But there you go. Secret evidence revealed. Hashtag secret evidence, hashtag physical gel. And he's actually not the first person to be busted this way either. There's literally $1 billion of Bitcoin at stake in this case here. And the defendant was caught forging emails in exactly the same way Kyle has been busted forging bank statements. So this is their expert witness that testified in the case. I identified a touch-up text edit marked content point in the PDF file associated with Exhibit A, which indicated that the text associated with the from, to, and date fields at the top of Exhibit A were edited. And apparently this is the same forensics guy that brought down the head of Silk Road, so he clearly knows what he's talking about. But that's not all. Like I said, we can go even deeper into the code to see exactly what he has edited. So what I've got on screen here is the raw code that prints out the statement period at the top of the page. And there's really only two things you need to understand here. The first is that all these lines that end in TF are changing the font. So this first statement is, go and get me this font called C20. I want it in size 8, and TF tells it to actually change the font. Now the next line is a TD command, and all that does is move the cursor around, so that's not overly important. The third line, so TJ, is basically a print statement. So it's saying here's a string, statement period, and then TJ means go and print it out in the current font at the current cursor location. So this block of code starts off by choosing the font, printing out the words statement period, choosing a slightly different font, printing out the date period, so November 1st to November 30th, changing the font again, just going from size 8 to size 9 this time, and printing out page 1 of 3. And that's all good. So this code is not inside a touch-up text edit block. It's untouched and perfectly legitimate. But let me explain this font issue a little further. So those font names, so like C00 and C21, aren't the actual names of the fonts. You have to dig a little bit deeper to get those. So in the August statement, you'll see that C00 is Futura BT Book, and so is C21. So these are the exact same font. So why are they in the same PDF? Well, that's because these are actually font subsets. So let's say you're writing a document, and let's say it's something to do with algebra or something, so you only use the letters X and Y for your classic algebraic equations and maybe a few numbers. If you wanted to embed that font inside the PDF itself, then usually you'd have to include everything. So all the lowercase letters, all the uppercase, all the symbols, all the numbers, everything. So even if it wasn't used, and that would be a waste of file space. So what Adobe did is introduce font subsets, where the font is embedded in the PDF file, but only the characters that you use, such as X and Y and all the numbers. So the big rhetorical question is, why is there a font subset in the PDF when the entire font is already embedded in the file by Discover? And I'm going to answer my rhetorical question because the PDF was edited. And if you look at the tables here, you can see that all of the fonts used by the original Discover statement begin with C2, and all the font subsets used by the Adobe Touch-Up tool begin with C0. So we can use that to determine which parts have been edited based on which font they use. All right, so what happens when we look at the August statement? So remember, in the November statement, you've got an untouched statement period, and the date range is written in one line, and it's all in the same font, and it's not in a touch-up text edit block. But in the August statement, though, we can see that Kyle has edited the date range. So you'll see here that there are two different fonts used. So C21, which is the quote-unquote normal font used by Discover, and then we've got this C00 font, which shows what's been edited. Now, it's really important to stress again that these two fonts may actually be identical. Like they might both end up resolving to the same font. But what the PDF is saying is that there are two different sources for these fonts. One source is from the Discover PDF, and the other source is from Adobe software. Yeah, so you can see here, it all starts out okay with the Discover font. Then it switches to the Adobe font to print out August 1st. Switches back to Discover font to print the hyphen, and then back to Adobe to print out the August again. And then finally back to the Discover font to print out the 31st of that month, 2019. So since that 31st of the month, 2019 part is unedited, we know that the statement is originally from a month in 2019 that has 31 days, which are January, March, May, July, October, and December. Obviously I left out August because if this was an August statement, he wouldn't need to edit it. Well, hopefully you guys picked up earlier, but there are two barcodes in that address field. We've got the USPS intelligent mail barcode at the top, which showed us that the zip code didn't match the Charlotte address that Kyle claims he lived at. But we've also got this other code over here, which is called a data matrix code. And if you download an app called Scanned It, you can decode that data matrix code, and it gives you the following text. And obviously this part is a date field, which decodes to 2019, 1st of December. And that makes perfect sense for a statement for the month of November. All right, so going back to this so-called August statement, all we need to do is scan that data matrix code, and it gives us a date of the 1st of November, which means this statement isn't August, it is October. Woohoo! So, using that same trick we did before, where we identified all the edits made with Adobe Touch-Up, we can actually produce a version of the statements showing what Kyle has changed. And here is that August statement, or actually the October statement. Obviously, he's edited the address to show Charlotte rather than Pleasant Garden. He's edited the statement period up the top to pretend that it's August and not October. And interestingly, it should read August the 1st, 2019. So he's actually deleted the year there, which is pretty sloppy. He has also edited the date on every single transaction to show August rather than October. But the most damning edit is this PayPal transaction, supposedly on August the 2nd, where he paid Benjamin $600 for rent. The edits show that this is complete horseshit, so it wasn't to Benjamin. And it certainly wasn't for $600 either. The real transaction was obviously to someone else, and it was clearly for some other amount, because you'll see up top here in the account summary that he had to go and update all the balances as well. And here is the November statement, which is legitimately from November, but he has still edited the address as well as the amounts on all the transactions. And you'll also notice that the statement period has the 2019 year written for both the beginning and the end. Right, and that, my dear friends, is Kyle Busted. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.